You know, life has a strange way of throwing you into moments you could never have prepared for. I thought I'd seen it all by now. 49 years of living, raising a daughter, surviving a divorce, and building my own little world of peace. But what happened that night? It's something I still replay in my mind, wondering if I'd misheard, or if the words were exactly what they seemed. Before I tell you, I want to ask, where are you watching from right now? Your city, your state, maybe even your small hometown. I'm curious, because I have a feeling, no matter where you are, you'll feel what I felt. It all started on a Thursday evening. My daughter Emily had invited her boyfriend, Paul, over for dinner. They'd been dating for about a year, and though I'd seen him plenty of times, there was still a certain polite distance between us, the kind where you smile, ask how work is going, and talk about the weather. That night I had made roast chicken with rosemary and garlic, mashed potatoes, and green beans sautéed in butter. The kitchen was warm from the oven, the scent filling every corner of the house. Outside, rain pattered against the windows, soft but steady, the kind of sound that makes you want to stay inside, barefoot, with a mug of tea. Emily was running late from work, but Paul had shown up early. He'd knocked on the door with his usual easy smile, holding a small bouquet of daisies. "These are for you, Michelle," he said, his voice gentle but certain. I thanked him, placing the flowers in a vase. "Emily should be here soon," I said. "You can make yourself comfortable in the living room. Dinner's almost ready." We talked casually as I moved around the kitchen, him leaning on the counter, me checking the chicken, stirring the potatoes. There was something relaxed in his posture that I hadn't noticed before, a warmth in the way he looked at me when I spoke. "You've got a really cozy home," he said, glancing around. "Thank you," I replied, smiling. "It's nothing fancy, but it's mine. Every little thing here has a story." The rain outside grew heavier, the occasional rumble of thunder making the lights flicker. I was just about to ask him if he wanted something to drink when I felt him step a little closer. His voice dropped, just enough that it almost got lost under the sound of the storm. "Michelle," he said quietly, his eyes meeting mine. "There's something I've been meaning to tell you." I froze for just a second, not because of the words, but because of the way he said them, like it had been sitting in his chest for weeks. My fingers tightened around the wooden spoon I was holding. "What is it?" I asked, my tone even, though my heartbeat had quickened. His gaze didn't waver. He leaned in slightly, his voice barely more than a whisper. And that's when he said it, the sentence that lodged itself in my mind and refused to leave. The words were unexpected. Not inappropriate, but deeply personal. They carried a weight that made the air between us feel charged, like the moment just before lightning strikes. My mind scrambled for how to respond, but before I could, the sound of the front door opening broke the moment. Emily's voice rang through the house. "Hi, I'm home." She came into the kitchen, shaking off her umbrella, smiling at Paul, then at me. "Mum, smells amazing in here." I managed to smile, hiding the storm inside me. "Dinner's ready. Let's eat." The three of us sat down at the table. Conversation flowed easily, at least for them. I smiled when I needed to, laughed when something was funny, but all the while, those whispered words replayed in my head. After dinner, Emily went upstairs to take a shower, leaving Paul and me in the living room. He didn't say anything more about what he'd whispered, and I didn't ask. But the way he glanced at me, as if he knew I was still thinking about it, only deepened the pull of the moment. When he left that night, he paused at the door, his hand on the frame. "Good night, Michelle," he said softly, his eyes lingering just a moment longer than they needed to. I closed the door, my heart still restless. Whatever this was, it wasn't going away. And deep down, I knew. The next time we were alone, things would change. The rain stopped the next morning, but the house still smelled like last night's dinner. Rosemary, garlic, and something warm that clung to the curtains as if the storm had pressed it there. I stood at the sink with a mug cupped in both hands, watching the yard bead and glitter in the new sun. The quiet let everything from yesterday return like a song I couldn't fully remember, but kept wanting to hum. Those words, tucked between thunder and the hum of the oven, had followed me to sleep and then to waking. I wanted clarity. I wanted to pretend nothing had happened. Both things lived in me at once. By mid-morning, I decided to walk it off. I pulled on a sweater, old jeans, and the soft sneakers I wear when I want to be the kind of person who goes for walks. The neighborhood was still dripping. Tires hissed past. Somewhere a radio played a classic rock station low enough to be a secret. I passed Mrs. Levin's roses, their heads heavy, and thought about the first time Emily brought Paul over, how he'd shaken my hand, how careful his smile had been, like he didn't want to overstay even the moment of a greeting. When I got home, a car I recognized was parked at the curb. Paul's. The sight pulled my heartbeat into my throat before I could reason with myself. He was on the porch holding a paper bag, something bakery bright tucked inside. He looked up when he heard the gate click and gave me that same soft smile. The air between us felt like unspooled thread waiting for a needle. "Hi," he said, a little hesitant. Wasn't sure if this was okay. I texted Emily to say I found my umbrella under the coat rack. She said she's at yoga, then meeting a friend for coffee. He lifted the bag like an offering. I brought cinnamon rolls. Thought maybe we could talk. There it was, the invitation enclosed inside his visit. The word talk sounded huge and careful at the same time. I opened the door and stepped aside. "Come in," I said, hearing how even I made it sound like a decision we both had to agree to. "Cinnamon rolls buy you 20 minutes. He grinned, relieved, and the room brightened with it. We stood in the kitchen unwrapping bakery paper, the smell of sugar and butter and spice curling around us. He set the bag down, then paused like he was choosing where to stand. Not too close, not too far, balanced on the edge of something real. "I should say it clearly," he began, eyes on the counter, then meeting mine. "Last night I wanted to tell you something, and I picked the worst possible moment. I don't want to be cryptic or disrespectful to anyone, especially not Emily, or you." The steadiness in his voice surprised me. It wasn't a confession trying to break through locked doors. It was a careful knocking. I nodded. "Go on." He exhaled, leaned his palms on the counter. "I want to ask Emily to marry me." The words landed with a clean, startling honesty that made the room feel bigger. For one long second, I thought I'd misheard last night because I'd been bracing for something messier. Then I felt heat behind my eyes and had to blink hard. My daughter. Marriage. A ring I hadn't seen yet, a life I could only begin to imagine for her. The cinnamon rolls sat between us like witnesses to a new chapter. "That's unexpected," I said, letting the truth be what it was. But not in a bad way. I steadied my hands on the edge of the counter the way he had. "She loves you. I can tell. And you love her." "I do." His certainty was simple, not the kind that tries to convince, but the kind that stands on both feet. "I love the way she thinks, the way she takes up space with her ideas, the way she gets quiet when she's reading and then laughs at a sentence like it told her a secret. I love how she is with you, too. I've never seen a mother and daughter who fight fairly, who apologize, who come back to the room. I felt that line settle in my chest like a hand laid there. Something tender untied itself inside me. We didn't always, I said. We learned. Paul nodded, then chewed on his lip, worry returning to his face. That's the other part of what I wanted to say. I'm asking for your blessing. And your advice. I don't want to rush her. I don't want to make her feel boxed in. She's told me stories about your marriage to her dad, how you felt yourself getting small without noticing until you were almost gone. I don't ever want her to feel that with me. I'd rather wait forever than watch her shrink. My throat tightened at the gentleness of it. If his whisper last night had been a spark, this was a steady flame, and it warmed the corners of the kitchen I hadn't noticed were cold. I pulled out 2 plates, cut the pastries, and we ate while the house listened. Butter flaked onto the counter. He brushed it into a neat pile, and we both laughed quietly at the domesticity of it. I want to show you something, he said after a moment, reaching into his jacket pocket. He brought out a small velvet box and held it in his palm. He didn't open it yet, as if the object itself might change the moment too quickly. Her grandmother's ring on her dad's side. He gave it to me last week. Said, if you're serious, you'll do right by it. I'm serious, Michelle. I want to do right. I looked at the box and the boy. No, the man, holding it. An image flashed across my mind. Emily at 6 with her hair in 2 crooked braids, asking if clouds ever got tired of holding rain. Emily at 13, standing in the kitchen doorway angry and bright, telling me she wished I'd leave her alone. Emily at 23, coming home shaken from a first job and letting me talk her through the kind of resilience no one puts on a resume. My girl had become someone brave enough to love. My girl had chosen someone who knew how to ask for help. You're asking me for my blessing, I said, setting down my fork. But what you're really asking is how to carry her heart. He nodded. Yes. Then here's what I know, I said, feeling the words gather themselves, calm and solid. Love isn't a shelter you build once and admire from the street. It's maintenance. It's checking for leaks when the forecast is clear. It's naming the draft crawling under the door and deciding together whether to seal it or sit in sweaters. It's listening to the story under the complaint. It's the courage to say, that hurt, without making it a verdict. He breathed out a laugh that sounded like relief. I can do maintenance. I think you already are, I said, and finally I opened the box. The ring was simple. An oval stone with a gentle glow, the kind of peace that doesn't shout. I imagined it on Emily's hand, catching the light as she reached across a table, a life gathering around it in a quiet circle. We made coffee. He asked me what kind of proposal would make Emily feel most herself. I told him the public displays that go viral would turn her into an actor in her own moment, and she hated that. I told him she loved places with a relationship to time. Used bookstores, old trees, anything that had endured. He said he'd thought about the arboretum where they sometimes walked on Sundays, the little bench by the pond that always had a few fallen leaves floating like letters that never found their addresses. She once told me that bench felt like an old friend, he said, like it listened without interrupting. Then that's the place, I said. But afterward, bring her here. Let the first door she walks through as a fiancé be one that already loves her. His eyes warmed. I was hoping you'd say that. We planned in small, practical steps. He would ask her next Saturday at dusk. I would make dinner that could sit warm without fuss. Baked ziti, a salad with peaches, the good bread. I'd pick up a small cake from the bakery, where the woman always tucks in an extra cookie by mistake. We would give the moment room to breathe. Before he left, Paul stood at the doorway with his hand on the frame, the way he had the night before, but everything in him had shifted. It wasn't a lingering now. It was a promise to return. "Thank you," he said. "Not just for saying yes, for trusting me with your stories." "Thank you for asking," I replied. "For trusting me with yours." When the door clicked shut, the house sighed into its own familiar quiet. I rested my forehead against the cool wood and closed my eyes. Blessing. The word kept unfolding new corners inside me. I had spent years keeping my life simple, clean borders and tidy routines, saying yes to this movement in our family's shape, asked me to soften those borders, not erase them, just bend them to fit around joy. All week I listened to the ordinary with a kind of reverence, as if it was rehearsing for the extraordinary. I bought peaches and they released their summer smell in the paper bag. I pressed dough into a pan and thought about the long work of rising. At the store, I picked the kind of white flowers Emily loves because they look like small moons. I ironed the tablecloth I only bring out for things that matter and thought, nothing changes and everything does. On Saturday, the light came in gentler, late August leaning toward September. Paul texted once, heading to the Arboretum. Then again 40 minutes later, she said yes. 3 words. My knees actually went weak the way people write in books, and you assume they're exaggerating. I put the ziti in the oven, checked the salad, then put the flowers in water and had to turn away because my face wouldn't stop smiling. When the gate clicked, I met them on the porch. Emily's eyes were red and shining in the way that says I cried, and I'm not sorry. She held out her left hand the way a child offers a found treasure, proud and a little disbelieving. The ring caught the afternoon and threw it back soft as a sigh. I hugged her. Then I hugged him. I don't know who said congratulations first. It was the sort of word that went around the room saying itself to everything. Dinner wasn't careful anymore. It was laughter loud and elbow bumping. The kind of eating where everyone reaches and no one apologizes because the reaching is part of the celebration. Emily told the story in her voice, how Paul had walked her to the bench and sat with his hands shaking just enough for her to notice, how a duck paddled by like a chaperone from a funny old movie. How he'd said, "I can't promise we won't argue, but I can promise we'll always come back to the room." How she'd said yes before he finished asking, then told him to keep talking because she liked the sound of him trying. "Mom," she said, turning to me, "he asked for your blessing, didn't he?" I looked at Paul, and he met my eyes without flinching. There was no secret left to protect. There was only the joy of saying the truth out loud. "He did," I said, and I gave it. My voice came out steadier than I felt. There was a quiver of something like awe underneath. "I told him I wanted you to love like a house that keeps the lights on when a storm hits." Emily reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "You taught me that," she said. "You kept the lights on." After cake, vanilla with raspberry filling, a smudge of frosting on Paul's lip that Emily wiped with her thumb without even noticing she was doing it. They lingered. The house had shifted around us, subtle but real, like furniture moved half an inch so the room flows better, and you can't remember how it was before. We ended up in the living room. Emily tucked her legs under herself. Paul sat forward on the edge of the couch cushion, as if leaning into the future. We talked about nothing and everything, leases and timelines, and whether the wedding should be under trees or under lights. Who'd cry first? Me, no contest. What it means to be 2 people building a third thing neither could make alone. At some point, Paul stood to help me in the kitchen. The plates clinked a quiet applause in the sink. He turned the faucet down low, as if the water should speak softly too. "There's something else I wanted to say," he murmured. "About last night." I waited. I didn't say it then because I was afraid it would be misunderstood, he said carefully. When I whispered to you in the kitchen, what I wanted to say was, I've never done anything this important, and I'm scared. I wanted your blessing, yes, but I also wanted your steadiness. You have this way of making rooms feel honest. I thought, if I could be brave enough to say it to you, I'd be brave enough to say it to her. The faucet ran, the window over the sink turned dusk into a color the house could wear. I set down the towel and laid a hand on the edge of the counter between us, the same spot where his velvet box had rested. It was unexpected, I said, letting a smile reach my voice. But I think you did it just right. He looked up, eyes bright. Thank you, Michelle. After they left, the night opened wide and quiet again. I walked through the rooms in that casual, aimless drift you do after a good gathering, picking up glasses, smoothing a corner of the tablecloth, extinguishing candles with a whisper. I found a white flower petal on the floor and set it on the windowsill. The house felt taller somehow, as if it had grown to hold a larger story. I made tea and sat at the kitchen table where last night's whisper had turned into this night's answer. I thought about how easy it would have been to let fear flatten everything, to misread a whisper, to harden around a worry, to decide that staying still was safer than stepping into change. But then I remembered the look in Emily's eyes, the shape her mouth made around the word yes, the way Paul held the space around her like it was both precious and normal. Consensual, honest, alive. That's the kind of love worth learning how to carry. Out the window, the yard was dark and humming. The streetlight threw a patient circle on the sidewalk. A moth practiced finding it and leaving it, finding it and leaving it. In the far house on the corner, someone's television flickered blue, a story unfolding for someone I'd never meet. I wrapped my hands around the mug and let the steam touch my face. My daughter's future had knocked, and I had opened the door. The unexpected whisper had become a vow said in the right ear. And me? I felt taller too, not because my life had been replaced, but because it had been asked to hold more. Before I turned off the light, I texted Emily. Proud of you, I wrote. Then, as if we were two women the same age walking home together after a long talk, I added, remember to keep coming back to the room. I set my phone down and stood for a moment in the middle of the kitchen, listening to the house breathe around me. I thought of the bench by the pond, of leaves that looked like letters without addresses, and I understood something I hadn't known I was waiting to learn. Sometimes the words we don't expect turn out to be the ones the heart has been preparing space for all along.